Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Madhu.
This is our official welcome, even though we've been chatting just a little bit before. But yeah, welcome. Thank you for coming on Living Legends interview series. And I've selected you as one of my interviewees for this Living Legends exploration. Um, you have some idea of your own life, and there's a lot of people in our area who've got some idea of your life, but I'd like a chance for you to tell and share. And I'll try and direct you in some ways and explore some of your motives and whys. And yeah, I've appreciated you over the years, knowing you and your journey. And it's enriched my life to know you. Um, to be a friend with you has been an enriching experience as well. So I'd like
Likewise,
to
thank
share.
you, Madhu.
Thank you. I'd like to share you with this audience. And the idea of Living Legends is that a shout out, meaning giving some light to your works in the world, because I believe what you're doing in the world is very important work. Could you give the viewers who may already know you or don't know you a little rundown on some of the works that you do? In particular, I think timely wise, your authorship of The Call and the series of books and your village, or the Village project and its cyclical nature. Would you care to explain?
For sure, yeah. Look, in some ways, one and the same thing. The dance with the village has essentially been a step away from what I previously grasped, if you like, and grasping was really what it was, and proselytizing or preaching, because I came through a thing that I also developed called Planet Radio. um, with my huge desire to overrun all the media of the world with environmental conscious media. That didn't turn out so well.
But you gave it a good crack and you were
But a
in there
good,
and you were trying, yeah? And how did that
yeah.
go? What was the result?
Look, the principal thing I think that prevented it from being to realizing in the way that I would have liked it to was simply a low powered radio services, and a bit ahead of its time in a way, because we had so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
High tech, high powered. Yeah.
well, yeah, people who had much more high tech and high powered than we were, but we had hundreds and hundreds of interviews with very interesting people and all sorts of pieces that have now been essentially passed into history. And they would make an amazing podcast. They would have made an amazing share in that fashion. And we were just before that. Before that, it was turning into anything. So it was
Mm.
still about broadcasting or narrowcasting and going to a signal rather than using the internet.
So
So
the
when the
medium
internet,
message, as we talked before, it's like you were looking at a new medium for message and
well, yeah,
audience.
look, the concept was, or the background to it was that I saw media as playing a key role in the distribution of what I perceived to be misinformation.
Mm.
That is, you would receive essentially a single narrative rather than having the opportunity to see a whole range of perspectives. And so Planet Radio gave people a great deal more perspective, but we didn't have the
Filter.
coverage to be
Yeah.
able
Oh,
to.
and the coverage, exactly. Yeah. So you were
Yeah,
looking at a low grade power way to access information for people everywhere. What
yeah.
barriers did you face?
Look, the first thing, of course, was that low power. It's like we only covered a small area. It was very low powered, so that meant it was not a great signal. And then towards the latter part of it, people began developing ways of reaching out to people on the internet. So while we also then fed Planet
Yeah.
Radio onto the internet, it was a bit early days for that. So it was pioneering work that was, I guess, a bit before its
Ahead of
time.
its time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So in a way, exactly, the internet DARPANET, ARPANET, all this facility for communication. You were tapping into the zeitgeist of we need a way to do it, and the military stepped in and said, here's your approved method and channels, but it still hasn't answered or addressed the question of how do people share information, because like the beginning pioneer days of the internet, as you and I both would know, it was a free for all out there. It's like
Yeah.
there's no censorship whatsoever, and the information was like overload. It was amazing. And of course, we're only dealing with a micro portion of the internet, which is, largely for stuff we don't even want to know about. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And,
So,
so
so methods of communication you're still looking for that weren't going to be censored or channeled or tricked.
yeah, it was that was the intention in any case.
Yeah.
And the essentially the lack of power was what I think prevented it, because we were quite successful considering the amount of power that we were emitting. And it was also a prompt that provided me with gifts that I didn't foresee. So the principal gift was connection with a whole range of people in a local region, from presenting it at Woodford Folk Festival to Brisbane City, Bribie Island, of various places that I ended up making a great deal of friends. So a lot of people in the music industry, a lot of people in alternative thinking directions. And so that served me amazingly in my life, but didn't quite achieve what it was that I really desired to achieve, and that was to shift the direction of how things worked in this world, on the basis, in particular, of then becoming quite well informed about what was happening in the world that was not getting coverage or was getting minimal coverage. So I learned about things that became immensely troubling, and in some ways also had to drop out of that world because it was so immensely troubling. It took me to a place of feeling completely powerless and unable to make any significant impact.
So to articulate that, I give it a crack for you to see how I go. The hopelessness of the corporate cycle, where to be successful, one must agree to exploit in the authorized channels, ways, means, methods, and you get blocked, shunned, outcast, denied access if you don't go. Is it along those lines that you're talking about?
Look, it was actually more along the lines of discovering a huge amount of information that spoke of the direction of the world that was being taken there by corporate channels, essentially by corporatization, so that everything becomes a resource to be used.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, including people, by the
yeah.
way.
That's right.
So that became quite a depressing thing. It was it saddened me that that was the direction we seemed to be going. And with my loss of energy around Planet Radio and being able to take it anywhere in particular, I had to withdraw, and withdrew for quite some time to go, well, what then? How?
And you went walking the world.
I did, and in doing that, already formulated was a concept of the thing called the village. And part of that was a part of the walking essentially was to say that I perceive people, just general people in the world, provided they're not in dire circumstance, as being beautiful souls that actually desire to reach out, connect, and be in society with others. In a mutually beneficial society with one another. And of course, walking the world for 7 years showed me that. Most interestingly, the those who were well off would frequently, in all the countries, would frequently warn me that those who are not so well off are likely to treat you badly. You'll be robbed, harmed, even killed.
And your experience?
Well, my experience was, first of all, my answer was, well, if that's what is supposed to happen, I'm in the hands of something greater than me. If that's what's supposed to happen while I do this, walking for balance, peace, and freedom underpinned by love,
Yeah.
then so be it. And the experience that I had was that most of those who were less wealthy were willing to give me their last everything, because in India, for example, they imagined me to be a white sadhu, or holy man, and treated me as such. In the various other countries, all of those people who wouldn't be perceived as being the top echelon financially would reach out to me, offer me places to live, food,
Yeah.
entertainment. Uh, it was very humbling and very beautiful experience.
Travel is awesome, right? You know, you get to break out of the whole paradigm of what you thought the world was. You've been told what the world was, all the advice to stay away from those poor, ugly people because they're dangerous, you know. All
Yeah,
this separation gets ended when you step into that other space. Yeah.
yeah, and one gains well, I certainly gained a perspective that I had imagined that I was among the privileged of the world. You know, that there were places I went where people said you must be a wealthy white man, and I'd go, well, not not in my circles, I'm not. And they would say, I would say, why would you think I'm a wealthy white man? And they say, well, you flew here, didn't you? And I would go, yes. And they had absolutely no possibility in their lives, as far as they were concerned, to ever be able to purchase an aeroplane ticket to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was perceived as a wealthy white man, and that, among many other things, shifted my perspective on who I am in the grand scheme of things. You know, that I have an enormous amount of privilege just because of the
Mm.
country in which I was born, the background that I have, my childhood, uh, the society which I can rail against, but which in many ways also maintains my standard of living.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's the rub, isn't it? You know, it's like the system that's raised you supports you, even though um, it could be done, like we've discussed many times, so much better. It's like how can we positively impact that when it's so fundamentally misdirected and corrupt in its intent and nature, and yet it is still supporting us. It's not like it is robbing us with taxes and all these things, but it is also, on the other hand, providing. So, you
yeah.
know, to do business, there's this necessary trade-off of some kind. Um, you've had to take your personal correct crusade. You tried to make it into a business with Radium, but you're a creative being also, and you've got this message, so you took it
I took
into
it
the
into
world.
I took it into the walk, and I took it into a thing I dreamed in called The Village, which then
Yeah.
turned into Village Matrix. But The Village, still now after almost 10 years, is powering along strongly. And it was essentially that as I witnessed the kind of demonization of face-to-face contact, the,
Hmm.
the diminishment of the importance of our social interactions on a face-to-face level, put in such a way by someone who I can't recall, but they said you need to be in
Yeah.
a place where you can smell one another,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of awful, but speaks to having a full experience of one another, allows us to share in our humanity. So bringing together a thing called The Village was in November of 2014. After having walked for a couple of years, I called the first gathering of a bunch of people and said, let's sit underneath a tarpaulin, which we did.
Yep.
And I said, let's re-establish face-to-face communication. If we're going to take ourselves into a place other than this divided world where we all live in individual boxes, and if you look at some of the pictures of some of the countries in the world, it has become, multi-story prison in many ways. Um, in some cases in this country, we're again more fortunate than that, but we still have an incredible sense, I think, of loneliness. So the idea of the village was to bring people together so they would have a crew that basically they knew the beauty of, the
Yeah.
ugliness of,
Mm.
the gifts that we bring each other and the faults that we bring each other, the positive and the negative, and we're still willing to stay in the room and say, your behaviors do not add up to who you are. However, in a social situation, there are certain behaviors that are not welcome, but you still are. So you may have to attend to some of those behaviors on the basis that there's a bunch of people to be considered when we're all together.
So in the consideration, there are some rules, like for people who've never heard of the village before, there are some rules to it which have been formed over time, but they're not, like you're just saying, this is not necessarily a written down thing. This is like a progression of development of people understanding through their experience the necessity of dealing with various issues. So it's kind
Yeah,
of like a upgraded anarchic university for humans, in my experience of how to
yeah,
get along.
yeah.
Uh,
And anarchy is misunderstood in that anarchy is presented as no rules. And that is absolutely not what anarchy is.
yeah.
Anarchy speaks more to that we have, if in some frameworks you would call them sacred laws
Uh,
that guide us all, and they can be just from our common experience. So that I don't want someone to kill me. That would not be my preference, and I would encourage, therefore, those people around me not to. On that basis, then I would also offer them the same in return. And that doesn't need necessarily to be written down because we all understand that life is something for which we yearn while we have it. So it's not it's not about saying here's a bunch of rules by which you must abide because I say so, which is a strongly directed and quite I hesitate to use a word, but kind of patriarchal approach,
authoritarian. Yeah.
authoritarian, patriarchal, aligned with one another in many ways. Um, uh, um, that basically says, I know better, so you now need to live in the way that I tell you. This is more about saying, come together. The established groundwork of it is for peace.
Hmm.
So we come together in peace with one another, with an intention of maintaining peace with one another, while also understanding that there may be things that come up that are not that peaceful. So our goal will always be to bring it back to peace rather than to escalate whatever disagreements or challenges there.
People are learning processes and building their own capacity to deal with people, other people,
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
themselves with other people, and other people bringing their things to them. And I have to give a shout out for just how you do it, and I'd like you to explain also your cycles of the circle work and how it
we
develops.
could be
But
we could be here for hours.
no, not too much, just a brief, because there is a formula to the ongoing development, and just to nod to that. But there's been so many, no doubt, highlights and even lowlights, but all of those highlights and lowlights are part of the structure or the agreed formula that you have extended and raised this under, which is not laissez-faire, not anarchic, even though those words could be used, but it's
Yeah.
self-directed play, basically.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and you're there like the old man who could be asked something or other at some time, and he's the eccentric one over in the swinging chair or something or other. But other than that, there's no particular leader. And even if you're not there, it still goes on because people have been brought into that culture.
Yeah. Look, a lot of yeah. You're talking to some things that have become, I guess, the subject in some ways of the village, in that for me and for others, in that you say there is no particular leader, and yet there is also a reminder that there is need for leadership.
That's right.
So uh, the effort has been to make it a circular leadership model, but in order for us to leap into a circular leadership model, we all need to have a fairly significant shift in the ways in which we engage with life itself.
Yeah.
So we've been essentially led down a path for all sorts of reasons of this will make it easier for you. We will make things easier for you by you conducting yourself in this manner.
I love the
So
simple one of, we need a latrine. And you go, yeah.
we do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, that essentially was the basis of it, was like, arrive and please have no expectations for what might be provided. And people would arrive and then say, well, who brought the toilet paper? And I'd say, well, hopefully you did, because I brought mine. And I brought a little extra, but not enough for 80 or 90 people. And is there firewood? And it's like, well, I don't know. Did you bring any? Um, are we allowed to bring dogs? Well, the land here that we're leasing from people says no, or yes, or but we have to then navigate how we're going to conduct ourselves within that.
that's right.
So yeah, the basis of it really has been, there are no rules that are applied to you except we come together in peace with self-responsibility driving our motivation to remain at peace.
Yeah.
And then let's see what happens. What is your contribution is a question that's asked. And that is also not a drive for people to contribute in a way that is perceived as valuable, but rather to recognize that their very presence provides a contribution which will, in one way or another, be valuable.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've heard of the concept of the Heyoka. But the Heyoka is kind of the medicine man who's sitting with all the other medicine men and women, and they all say, "This is the way it's going to be." And the Heyoka goes, "Well, I actually disagree with you. So even though you're all standing on your feet, I'm going to stand on my head." And
The trickster, the jester, the
yes,
truth
and
speaker.
that person provides, it's quite a difficult journey, but that person provides lessons that are an amazing contribution that can be quite harmful for the Heyoka, the jester, the trickster.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult for them, but they bring a lesson to the entire body of people that go, okay, well, we now recognize why we are all standing here on our feet. It's more comfortable, the blood doesn't rush to your head, and so on. And it's just a simple example, but it kind of galvanizes people's agreements to be a certain way with one another.
So you let
But
things play out if necessary, and the common sense approach of how to deal with it is just held in space until it emerges in a sort of mystical way.
somewhat, yeah. So yes, allowing things to happen. So many people said, you should ban this, you should ban that, you should stop this from being present, you should stop that from being present, you should blah blah, all the shoulds, one after
And
another.
this is directly in the censorship mode. So if you're dealing with a whole new interface of communication that is whole communication, this is very important data analytics selection for that entire medium of human expression communication. If you've got shoulds and shouldn'ts in the way, then that's going to alter the entire experience and
Absolutely.
the methodology and the purpose.
Yes. Yes. So the purpose is actually to take things to a different place than the one to
Right.
which we're accustomed.
Yeah.
And the motivations of others to, the number of times I had people indicate to me that what we were doing was valueless because we didn't do this or we didn't do that. And one of those examples was, for example, substance. So you should ban all substances. And I would say, okay, great. Look, you can do that. You can introduce that as a concept. Or if you like, we'll then ban any illicit substances, tobacco, alcohol, uh, um, coffee. And they go, no, not those ones.
Milk. The vegans are here.
Right.
Don't
The
offend
vegans
them.
are in, so the milk's out, the cheese is
Non-rainbow
out.
water. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it became a question of, well, how does one of us determine that this is how it's meant to be? So on that subject, for example, with substance, there were some instances where people overdid it in a variety of ways, and that caused the group of people who'd known each other then for some time and been going to these meetings regularly, these gatherings regularly, to say, actually, this isn't how we want our experience to be.
Yeah.
So, as a group, then, a combined group of people, we sat with one another and agreed that those behaviors were not
Right.
going to
Acceptable.
be present for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so
Lovely.
beyond that, then it was then I really am looking at a having done a lot of study. I am looking at a situation where if you look at the forecasts for the future of Western civilization as a way and means of moving forward, we have very likely somewhere between 20 and 60 years before this system that we have bound ourselves to collapses. Now, collapse does not mean like a building that has been detonated. Collapse is a steady process according to a human life. So,
Right. Yeah.
the quality of the air that we're breathing now is not as high as the quality of the air that we were breathing 50 years ago. But do we notice that? Not
I do.
particularly.
I'm not living in the city and the quality of air is great, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Makes a great difference just by location change. Yes.
Essentially, and that's part of your village project too, because people have put themselves into the boxes and you've made an escape valve where people can play. Like we met years ago and had the experience where it was at Confest.
Yep.
And, you've got a life going on here, but all of a sudden you can step back into this other life that gives you permission with these other people, that gives you permission to expand yourself, explore new areas. And uh, did Confest influence somewhat the village and its development or some approach? And
To some degree, yes. I studied how Confest was first created, and essentially was a festival of conferences. So it was the sharing of ideas. It was started in South Australia, if I recall, and I think Don Dunstan played a role in putting it together from memory. And essentially, it was a festival of conferences. So it's become rather different to that. It's not really that any longer. It is more about, I suggest, play now than
Mhm.
serious conferencing. But it played a role. Going to other gatherings and festivals also played a role. Again, back to things like substances. No drugs, no alcohol, but we'll sell you alcohol at inflated prices once you're in.
Right.
And of course, the other part of that is that you say to a bunch of adults, know this and know that. You put them into a place where, if that's not how they want to conduct themselves, they will then conduct themselves like children. And they will hide those things away from those who said, you can't do this. And so we become childish. We drop our adultness
Yeah.
and go, well, all right, well, I'm just going to deceive you then. How can that possibly be a sensible way for a group of adults to move forward in a society? It can't. It absolutely and utterly cannot. So a part of this was to say nothing is banned here, but there are some things that if they come across to the group of people as being disturbing or upsetting, then you will hear about it and you'll be required to be a part of hearing about it.
Do you go into the level of membership and, drawing a line on inclusiveness, exclusiveness? Has that happened or any push for that? Because in some ways you're developing a culture, and that culture has its own, like laws we're talking about or rules. These are like naturally adopted within a particular culture. And it seems like or feels like you're birthing a cultural expression or a
Yes,
rebirthing what
yes,
was potentially more pagan village, natural ways of relating, except they usually had religions or codes or traditions that had hundreds of years of building those up for
well, yeah,
reasons.
and they had been established for essentially the same reason. You know, they'd been initially
Something.
established essentially to manage the fact that as soon as we're together in a group, we will need to have some consideration for one another.
Yeah.
We will need to be able to express that, you know, this suits me or this doesn't suit me. This is dangerous to me or this is not dangerous to me, and so on.
So do you find a push towards membership? Do you find that that sense of exclusivity is building for the village?
Look, so there's some things that, let me see, what's the one that does it? The Burning Group have you know, their 10 radicals, and one of them is radical acceptance. And for a very long time, I've poo-pooed the whole idea because, you know, radical acceptance essentially says everyone, no matter what. What I would say is that there's a general acceptance, but no need to get radical about it, because there are some behaviors that means that the behaviors are radical and they're not suitable, and they cannot be maintained in a societal picture, let alone a cultural picture. And some of the solutions to those have become as violent as the behaviors themselves in our current civilization. So finding ways to shift that, if you like, so that it becomes, rather than a violent response, that we have a response that says, hey, human, something about what is going on for you is either hurting you, harming you, destroying the goodwill that exists in all of us. We would first like to identify that, if possible. Rather than going down a punishment model, we'll go down a model of how can we understand you.
Is there a willingness of the villagers to go there, to do that, to extend, if they haven't already journeyed a few times together in the village?
There's both, you know, of course, there's both, you know. So there are a great number of people now who basically are, who have the concept, you know, have really come to understand the process of this. There are still those who say it must be done this way, it must be done that way. And my answer to them is always, well, go and do that then. You know, go and create your own gatherings of people and put as many rules in place as you wish. It's just that in this environment, there's a group of people now who've decided that this works, and we want to continue to move forward, creating beautiful connections between a range of people, essentially a whole community of people who, in one way or another, if they're able, will have your back. You know, will be able to tend for you, care for you, if the need arises, and tend for you and care for you even if the need isn't there, because that's naturally what we want to do.
Have some other villages sprung up recently outside of your own direct involvement?
Have other
villages in the model sprung up and gone on?
So there's there are now 2 locations where we regularly do the village, and they're quite different experiences.
Right.
They've the intention for me in the long term, of course, is that we will continue to have that variety. It continues to run under a banner called the Village, which, by the way, was never meant to be a brand. It was never meant to be like a corporate style brand. It was intended to be, if the solutions that we have been presented with, or the processes that we've been presented with, are presenting in this fashion. So the fashion is, be very individual, come and work 9 till 5 or more, have a day or 2 off here and there, blah, 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 all of those things, then, and gather in cities, then clearly the way to move oneself out of that particular model is to return to what worked for literally tens of thousands of years, the village model. And did it work perfectly? Of course not. Show me the perfect person, we'll get a perfect system. But did it work for all of those tens of thousands of years? Yes, it did. And it was really essentially colonialism that destroyed a large amount of that, which then turned into colonial corporatism, which is continuing to destroy it. And, by the way, is currently looking at destroying the whole of this place in which we live, with small amounts of topsoil now available all over the world, and industrial agriculture continuing as though it doesn't matter. let's not even get into climate change, but climate change is largely predicated on not the fact that you're driving a motor vehicle around, but the fact that industrial farming is releasing huge amounts of gases into the air, is killing our soils. Soil is one of the basic places at which we really must start.
Basis of life, exactly.
It is the basis of life, yes.
I saw a thing from Bill Gates when some flicking past, and I saw he's like, "Oh, I don't think trees are the answer. I've never planted a tree. You know, that's all bogus." It's like, nature and living within and learning to live within. Okay, so I wanted to go because there's a general appreciation for nature of all of the villages, but there is also, I want to get to this point, there is also the push for people to live in community. And naturally, this comes up again and again. Oh, let's get a block of land and let's all live together and do that. Has that happened yet? I mean, there's been many pushes from memory, but has it happened where people have managed to get that together yet?
In a range of different circumstances with small groups, yes, it has. So the people have met at the village gatherings and have created a different model to the one that's been dreamed in, and have said, oh look, 6 of us have got sufficient to actually buy a piece of land, and we can create what they call in New South Wales multiple occupancy, or MO.
Yeah.
Largely, they have presented a huge number of challenges in that it either becomes a distantly based suburb where no one seems to talk to one another, or they realize that the things that they were wanting to do and the processes that they have for dealing with disagreement are really not well in place, and all sorts of challenges occur. There are some successful ones, but it's not very common. The dream, if you like, of the village and Village Matrix Incorporated, which is the direction we've gone down in order to be able to interact sufficiently with the current system to be able to secure some land.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. And get some land. You have to be in their realm to get a stake in their realm. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's then about basically saying, okay, well, let's find a significant size first piece of land with permanent water on it, and let's look at how we focus into making that a place that we have stewardship with. So enough people engaged in putting a small amount of funds in to be able to say, I don't own the land, but I am one of the stewards of this land. It's in many ways similar to the native peoples all over the world, and certainly in this country, where the original people never bought and sold from one another in terms of land, because they didn't see the land as being theirs to do that with. However, if we go down the model of saying, all right, well, we're going to engage with you long enough to get what you will see as a valid ownership piece of paper that says that this is ours, put that into a trust that is then administered by all of us. And we do that once, then we do it twice, then we do it 5 times, then we do it 10 times, then 50, then 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, and so on, so that we actually come to a place where we realize that it is absolutely not an imperative that humans buy a space on the place that they live. No other animal that we know, and we still have these animal bodies, no other animal that we know has to purchase land from some other member of their community, or purchase a place to live from some other member of their community.
Mm.
We, however, have utilized finance as a way to
Monetize.
Initially as a way to prevent violence.
Right.
I want that. You have that, whether that was bought or sold or whatever in the first place, but you have that. I want that. I have gold. What about I give you this gold and then I have that? And that essentially was all it was initially. These days, however, the gold has become the motivation rather than the method of exchange. So the place that I'm dreaming can occur is that there will be enough spaces known as Land of the Village or Land of Village Matrix that anyone who has ever had anything to do with the village and guests will be able to say, I will never be homeless again. I will never be cast out again. There will always be a place for me to go. Why? Because every door at every one of those places is open to ensure that I have a place on this world into which I was born and which I am a part of, rather than a separation from this world that says, you don't belong here unless you've paid for it.
That's the word, is belonging. That's my
Yeah.
my thesis, my antithesis as well, and my hypothesis is synthesis as well. It's all of these parts is about belonging. You
Yeah.
know, it's a problematic thing for us. You mentioned animal body, whether it's animal or human or whatever, whether that's different, but still our souls are going from body to body. You know, we're having life to life in different cultures, different planets even. Who knows, right?
Who knows? Yes.
Can't commodify this. I can't put a value and trade on this. I have my own inner awareness. Everyone else has their own inner awareness. And we're trained to think, but we never really belong with all of these thoughts. The tribal peoples used to belong to their land, and they would know themselves by the land and the stories of the land. And the land would communicate openly as other living creatures communicate with other living creatures. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're kind of at a crisis point of society, and you've heard my
There's no kind of about it.
no.
There's no kind of, we are at an absolute crisis point in society and civilization. That is, there are no simple solutions in fact, no solutions we know of for what we're about to face in the coming 2 generations. There are about 50 to 60 harvests of industrial agriculture remaining for us. That's it. Now, 50 to 60 means that I'll probably be gone, and you may well be, but there's a bunch of people I know that will not be. What do we do when after 50 or 60 harvests, which will diminish over time, but eventually nothing will grow? What do we do then with billions of people who have been depending on that because they've been sold into depending on that, who've never learned how to actually plant a plant of their own, who've never learned how to build something with their own hands, who are stuck on these damn screens that we all utilize, but that
The
some
irony
becomes
of us coming together
vortex.
here rather than in person. Like normally we're to get together in person, but we're like, oh, we'll use this for this purpose. But
And that's for me, that's also a part of the game. It's not about saying all of these things are wrong. There's no wrongness about them until we find ourselves addicted to them. We find ourselves
depending,
so drawn into them that we can't withdraw comfortably.
yeah,
So it's absolutely imperative, the way I see it, that people continue to be face to face, that people have times initially where they don't have these things. And it's far beyond me to say, well, we're going to create a community where you can do this for 1 hour a week. Rather, the intention of the village, in terms of its way in which it interacts with society, with people, is to say, you will come to a place where you will recognize the value of this because you will try it, you will have an experiential relationship with it, and you will go, hang on, I had almost forgotten how beautiful it was to be able to gaze into someone's eyes and speak with them plainly. And I now want to remind myself of that and have sufficient discipline, the gift of discipline, to be able to say, I'm going to conduct myself in this fashion now.
yeah,
I will not continue to be drawn into this endless vortex, but I can dabble at the edges of it because it also offers some benefits when one uses it rather than has it use one.
yeah.
Yeah.
When's the next one? You've just had one.
So end of June, the last weekend in June, first moving into so 29th of June thereabouts.
Okay.
And that will be on the northern side of Brisbane, up on a place in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. Then another one in around September, and the way I'm looking at it, another one in November, because the original call for this was in the last weekend of November of 2014. So I'm kind of up for celebrating a decade of this
Sure.
amazing, amazing dance.
How's the book going? The Call and its series?
Yeah, so there's the intertwining link there. So as I went walking our world and then kicked off the idea of the village, I thought, okay, well, I've always wanted to be an author, so now I'm going to write this as well. And I've had so many people say, why didn't you write about the experiences and stories that you had while you were traveling? And I thought, so ho hum, like how many people have done that? And
Just to be clear, can we just go over the facts of that? Because it was absolutely amazing what you did. Because I know I don't know those facts, but I'm going to ask you to spill them. How many countries did you go to?
I only walked 9 countries,
Okay. How far did you go?
approximately 13,000 kilometers. So did I
How long?
calculate? Pardon?
Sorry. How long were you gone walking?
7 years.
Hmm.
So there was some sitting around as well, writing.
Exactly. And it wasn't all walking. Yeah.
No, 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 no.
It's Peter sitting our world as well, you know. Yeah.
Well, look at and this was something also that people were encouraging. There were those who were disappointed when I would say, "Oh, no, actually, I'm just like around the corner from you at the moment, and I'm writing a book in a really comfortable house." And they'd say, "But hang on, aren't you walking our world? Doesn't that mean that you have to walk this much every day?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I had a funny feeling that I got to make the rules."
Are you my patron telling me what I got to do? You know, where's the
Right.
money, baby? You know,
Well, right, and not even that, but
no, of course not. But
where's your
who are
authority
these
to?
people to expect anything of you? You know,
Yes, yes.
when I saw you taking off, and I kept in watch of your adventures unfolding. You started off kind of like a blog, didn't you? You had a
I did. Yeah.
yeah, and then it was like, this is too hard. I'm walking and adventuring way too much to record all of this.
Oh, look,
Uh,
yeah, look, I watch there are others who are doing similar things and they get very caught up with, a daily video piece or something. And I
Update
think,
me. What are you up to, Pete? Help me. Tell me. I need to know. Yeah.
right. And it's like, how do I genuinely experience what it is that I'm doing if I'm constantly trying to translate it for the what enjoyment, edification, blah, blah, whatever of others. So it was the principal thing around walking our world for me was a self-discovery matter. It was like so many things that I seemed to think were important uh, have been brought into question by the life that I've led.
Yeah.
So, what of those things that I still think are important can I drop to discover the reality of their importance or the unreality of their importance?
Mm.
How can I uh, create a life for myself that is driven by uh, more key matters than those I've been told are the important matters of life? Do I need to be incredibly financially wealthy? Do I need all the comforts that are around me on a regular day by day basis? Do I have any clear understanding of the suffering of others in various countries around the world or the enjoyment of them, even though I would imagine it to be suffering? Um, uh,
Yeah.
what how much of the stuff that I own is junk? By the way, it's almost everything. um, how much of it, do I own anything, or when I purchase something or get something and have something, does
This
it
is
own me?
me. Yeah.
All sorts of essentially downline hardcore questions that I wanted to bring to myself. So sure, I wanted to stay connected with people and had the internet as a way in which that could occur. But the principal thing for me was asking, I guess, that age-old question: who am I? What am I? And what on earth am I doing here? And 7 years of doing that,
You've got some
clarified,
answers now. You've got
yeah,
some answers.
did clarify some things. It really
Yeah,
did. Um,
yeah.
People will say, have said to me, well, can you share what those things are? And actually, no, you can't. One can't. Uh, uh,
But you can share with others who have.
you can share
Those
with others who have.
you can share that with others who have. If you meet someone in another place who has the similar mentality, intelligence, heart space, you realize that the distance, the culture, the barriers, whatever, are meaningless
Yes,
and
yes.
present to another human, with some differences, basically.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, just some differences of essentially, I guess, their cultural and societal structure, the one they've grown with.
So
But I think that,
sorry to cut you, but you're developing a new culture and a new structure, just to give that impetus of what you're saying. And it isn't a rules-based one. It's an experiential, uh, wisdom path, so to
yeah,
speak.
from
Uh,
which might arise a range of rules, certainly. Um,
right. But
but
independent from the process that's forming it, it'll be
yeah,
individuals determining for themselves.
yes,
So
yes, self-determining, yes,
self-determination. I think this is key. My phrase of really, I think belonging is at the nub of it, and the solution consequence of what we should be focusing on is self-determination at all levels,
yeah,
So you have every right to say yes or no to whether we have an interview, and others have every right to tune in or not if we make it public,
right,
uh, and so on and so forth. There's always this opt in, opt out. And when we have these other mediums and examples of community that I know I can go to that market, for instance, and get a whole new different conversation, or I can go to this event or this festival, I've got a whole new conversation and perspective. And you work out over time where you feel your people are,
right,
and you
yes,
learn about yourself as you do traveling, right? No, this is, I learned in astrology, your rising sign in astrology changes as you move around the planet. So literally, you are encountering yourself as others encountering you in a new way every time you're traveling around,
yeah,
changing longitudinally. And
yeah,
so this broadening of the mind and self-perception is also going on. We can't help that with everyone on every part of the planet is now multicultural and pretty well mixed. There's very few exceptions to that.
yeah,
So the notion of one law, one culture being ubiquitous or being implanted or supplanted over everyone else is kind of ridiculous. It's this sophisticated notion of self-discovery, self-determinism,
yeah,
and micro communities, that have the
yeah,
dignity of being able to look after themselves and
yeah.
cooperate
Look,
with have that dignity. Yeah.
look, Madhu, if you go down that path as well, for your generation, which is my generation, we've seen a certain way in which the world has been conducted, from Cold War to the 1980s, greed is good, to and so on. I watch now those who are in a much younger age group, so the millennials, if you like, or the close to millennials, and there's a huge amount or a huge number of them that are sitting in a place of everything's lost. There's no future
I hope.
for us,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
hope, and that's such a like, imagine a generation or several generations leaving that for their children, for their following generation, to say, there is no hope. And oh, by the way, I'm not even going to bother to step in to see if I can find a way for you to be able to foresee, a beautiful future. Um, uh, if we're unable to embrace that as being the most important thing that a generation has to do, is to make sure that its following generations are able to live a good life and know that there is a future. I don't know what hope there is for us at all if we're unable to embrace that and say, this is the important thing, is that I've now lived this much of my life. I've seen all sorts of things. And those who are in their teens and their 20s and so on need to be able to look forward into the future and go, I think that I'm going to be able to experience a grand life. I'm going to be able to, have a beautiful experience in this thing called living. I think that's definitely our responsibility to attend to, and I largely see that our generation and up from our generation, in a very significant manner, don't care or don't seem to.
Yeah, it's my synthesis of things as and my analysis of things as I've gone through as well. It's pretty well accurate. But don't forget also our baby boomer parents and that generation, they had all the benefits of all of the industrial age and no comparison, virtually no comparison for from one generation to the next. And this degradation of hope, they had it also with the duck and cover threat of nuclear
Yeah,
winter in the 50s and 60s. And, I don't know if you've seen that horrific Japanese art display of all of the nuclear blasts on the planet, played in about 3 minutes.
no, I
It's
haven't.
devastating to see, the amount of explosions that have already gone on. All the colonial powers, whether it was Russia or France or America, all these ones that are colonial, have been detonating these bombs. You have to understand, you do, and everybody has to come to understand that that system has to die. It has
Yeah,
to.
it's in the process of actually.
I think that's what's going on.
Yeah,
I'm praying for it, but whatever, if anyone hears my prayers, but that's my hope. I'm working towards sovereignty is, my offering, and about sovereignty, and I've been thankful that you've been an audience for that and an ear for that
yeah.
for many years. I'd like more collaboration and conspiratorial input from people in this, but I feel similarly to what you've said, is that this is actually something that's ahead of its time. It's before its actual time that people are looking for it. I'm hearing people looking for it, but I poke it up in front of them. They go, yeah, not that. What else is there? It's got to be sexier than that.
Right. Yes, 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 yes. Well, welcome to that club because
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's
it's
a
got to
matter
be
of time.
sexier than that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm as sexy as I'm gonna get. Uh, I reckon. Anyway, but so I've always hoped for in my pursuit, your path of pursuit of just creative endeavor, consistency, determination, clarity of purpose, clarity of language around your purpose too. I think that's one of the things I really admire about you, Peter, is that and why I sought to interview you is that you have a lovely command over your own language, your self-talk, the language around your life, the buttressing of your life with um, possibilities. You
Thank you.
leave the field open for wonderful things to happen, and you create good vibes where you go. And that, like on a spiritual level, this example, guru, teacher thing that others accuse you of, that you accuse yourself of sometimes, and play up against and grind
Yeah.
on and have a wee upon, and all these aspects of yourself. You're a beautiful human, and for I hope that people get to see this and get a better sense of some of your deeper purpose in your works, because I know you're going to achieve your goals.
Thank you, Madhu.
For yourself, I know you'll achieve your creative goals. You're already achieving them. You have already achieved a lot, right?
Just published the audio book of
Yes, I
Book
was
Zero of
listening to it.
Courage.
It's lovely. You have the radio voice, so why wouldn't you do the audiobook? It makes
Oh,
perfect
and,
sense.
and look, still had doubts. I've not recorded an audio book before, and I'm recording it and putting it up and thinking, oh my God, I hope this is all right. I hope this is. And then I listened to a bit of it myself and thought,
It's
it's
good.
not bad. It's actually
It's
very
really
good.
good. So I urge all of our listeners, viewers of this interview, to seek out. I'll put a link of the call and the village matrix
Thank you.
into our post. And I'm just hoping that people can hear this message in time. There's
Oh, look,
a crisis. There is.
there's no need to hope. Do I become frustrated? Certainly. Do I wish things would move faster? Certainly. Um, and I know that you reside in a similar place in that not all of this is guided and directed. Some of it is, but not all of this is guided and directed by you, me, or any one of us. And there is an actual organizational
Timing.
aspect of this that's at play. I'm Yes, I would love for this to just like take off, and all of a sudden I'm able to watch it turn into this amazing thing that covers the planet. That would be fabulous. From a personal ego perspective, that would be fabulous. Um,
Fabulous.
at the same time, I'm also able to withdraw from that and drop away from that and go, I just saw at the last village a person who got quite a solid head injury and neck injury. And we basically put all of our energy and effort into both physically holding him, so waiting for an ambulance to come, um, and in fact had people like basically making him stay alive, and he's now well, although he has some recovery to do. We also sent prayers from circles a couple of times that were immensely powerful. It's amazing the impact that is present in every single moment. It doesn't have to be a world beater in order to be doing incredibly important work. I'm
Yeah.
receiving messages from people who've just joined up with us and just come to their first experience and gone, oh my goodness, how did it take me so long to find that this was here? And in some ways, I thought, well, it's probably a good thing you didn't find it 5 years ago. It's not what it was now that it was then.
That's important to talk about. Let's just briefly touch in on, you do cycles within cycles within cycles. You do the medicine wheel
Yeah.
of different activities under different influences in a cyclical manner.
Yes.
Yes.
Quick overview. So 13 came to me in a whole series of dreams that I've never had anything like them before, that said that 13 was an important thing to embrace, an important number to embrace. And that created or became a governance wheel. And I won't go into all the details of that governance wheel, but it's available on villagematrix.org online, and you can have actually a look at how that wheel looks. And that's a decision-making wheel and a governing modality, a governing method. Is it flawed? Probably. Does it work? Yes. So that 13 thing is also a shift. If you look at most of the great traditions, 13 has a relevance for one reason or another. The size of a coven, so it can be made into evil. But then there were 12 disciples and a thing called the Christ in there. That's 13 as well. There's
13 moons in
13.
a year. Yeah.
Pardon?
13 moons in a year.
13 moons in a year. There's referencing to 13 in the Vedic texts. There's reference to 13 Buddhist texts, and on it goes. So it was just a number that came through for me, and so that's the wheel of governance is based on the number 13. But in the midst of that, I also did a series of studies that said that all energy moves according to a 0 to 9 movement. And this is the basic law of how life works. And it said that 0 was the empty nothingness of possibility. Like, okay, well, that makes pretty good sense. And from there is 1, which is focus. So it has to be witnessed that there's an empty nothingness. And by that number 1, witnessing the nothingness, 2 happens. And 2 is substance occurs. Then 3 is the making of a triangle. So the observation of the witnesser witnessing the grand possibility of everything makes 3, which is form, and we are in form. From there comes determining what will we do with this energy and this form. From there comes understanding. As we do something with it, we come to understand it better. As we come to understand it, it moves to imagination and magic. That's 6. So it's like magic, not as in ickety pickety pow, but more like, okay,
Creativity.
now I have an understanding of this, then I can do things that would be perceived as magic because I have the chance to dance with this energy. With that, the ability and understanding of that comes freedom. And that's the freedom to dance in exactly the way we wish, that we have so many more ways than those we've been told that we could be interacting with this amazing thing called life. From there comes 8, in that we generally will then find some way that we like better than others. And so we'll form patterns about how we want to continue doing things. And then the grand designer of all things will go, it's not all about you doing that. It's also about weird and wonderful things happening that you never expected. That's 9, chaos. And that's the end of the energy movement, and back to 0, something happens. So I decided, well, if that's how this is supposed to work, I'm going to apply it to the village gatherings. So from the outset, it was village 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the call being 0, hence the village first book is actually book 0 of the village. So that something happens of the village series of books, as well as the gatherings 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then it was 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, and 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, and we've just finished village 4, 4. 4 is determining. So we were determining our determining at this village, and the next one will be understanding our determining. In the determining of determining, people are now also getting this cycle, and they're going, I wonder what that could possibly mean. One of the things that occurred, and you won't stop me now, one of the things that occurred is that, yes, we had a loved member of the community who had an accident and hurt themselves, and the response from the people that were there was just superb. So it was such an example of the determining of determining, that we're at peace with one another. We're underpinned by love. We will care for one another. We had people holding his head. We had people shouting at him to come back. We had people holding his hands. We had immediate response. And we realized to a very large degree that we were drawn into the experience of that person as though it were ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
And we underpinned the way in which we're operating with that thing called love, care, and responsibility for one another. It was just the perfect example of us determining what our determining is. So
I was going to ask you, not just then, but before, there was some kind of idea of metrics or how do you know you've succeeded or whatever. And it's like you're just saying, I know that there's so many personal moments that you've gone through and experienced in these. It's not possible to determine a metric for its success.
It's not about a metric. That's like trying to, it's like trying to add up Scrooge's fortune. It's actually about going, here's something I noticed. Oh, and I also noticed this. And what did you notice? Oh, you noticed that. Okay, I see the relevant. Yeah, that's relevant.
So engagement, continual contribution, this is the only real metric you've got for success of it.
Yes. Yes. Look, if I were to pass on, and I shall, one point or another, and it were not to continue again, I am now in a place where I think, if it not to continue in any sensible kind of form, then I would still be satisfied that my contribution during this life was a valid contribution. There are people, so many friendships have been made, so much care between people. People have financially helped each other out. People have formed communities with one another. It's impossible to put a metric, because you can't follow the individual lives, feelings, sensations, and experiences of every person there. And in order to create a metric, you would need to do that, and then you'd be back to being Big Brother, keeping an eye on every single move that everyone made, and that would hardly be the purpose, because
that's not happy enough.
Extract from there.
You're not happy enough right now. We're having the sunrise. You're meant to be at an 8. Sorry, what are you doing here?
Yeah. Social score system is
exactly.
not part of the process. Yeah. So now the task is to continue that on as long as I'm able, and to watch my changing role in that, to witness that role, to ask myself questions about the validity of choosing various roles or not choosing various roles, to write the rest of the books, to have literally millions of people buy the first book in one form or another, not so that I can suddenly live in a palace, but rather so that the first, even second, third, 10th uh, parcel of land for which we will be responsible can be put into a
Yep.
system that is perceived as saying, well, we can't take this from you unless you're willing to sell it, and we can't sell it because it owns us.
Yep. Yep.
So it really is moving in that direction. I'd like millions of people to buy the books, to get onto the fundraiser that we're just launching at the moment. That's a matter of a couple of dollars, like $26 a week for a short amount of time, to demonstrate to us that should we all come together, we are a force to be reckoned with. We cannot be held down if we are only willing to put a small part of our energy and effort aside for the greater good, for the good of all.
Yeah, I would definitely urge everybody to have an experience of the village, to know what it is. Without having had that experience, it's not going to have any value to you. There's so many millions of sites and projects, but you got to taste it. You got to come and taste it for yourself. There was
Yes.
another part to your cycles of things that I did recall I was going to speak to, was that feels like every single cycle, unique individuals are also called, like for the purpose of that cycle. So whilst that's running along in the background, it's kind of subtly calling those people in for that work of that
Yes.
cycle. Um,
Yes.
and that's where you go, the flawed, perfect system that you've arranged. It doesn't matter. You're actually just demonstrating that you creatively put out a call and the response comes. And
Yes.
why I wanted
Yeah.
to shout you out is because you are creating your own path in this from your own dissatisfaction of life, creating a product, a way, a methodology, a synthesis, a process for people to adopt, follow, or witness, try on,
Yeah.
expose themselves to in a good way.
See if
Yeah.
it suits.
See if it suits. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Try it.
if it doesn't, as I've said to many people, if there are things about it that don't suit, then my question and my call to those people is to say, all right, well then become engaged with this and change it.
Yeah.
Um, don't look to me to be the grand leader that you pass on whatever it is that you think should happen and tell me now you go and do that. Rather, if it's something that calls to your heart of, well, this should be like this, the response I've had to so many people over those 10 years is to say, I see where you're coming from. So are you going to lead that?
Hmm.
And the number of times that people will go, oh, no, 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 I don't want anything. No, I want you to do it. It's like, well, it's actually not that important to you then, is it? It's
Hmm.
not, it's just you trying to load something onto me, to give me extra things to do. If it's ever becomes important enough to you, perhaps you'd like to, engage with taking action on those things you see as important.
You would do that every single village, I'm sure.
I do. Yep.
Yeah.
And some people have never come back because they thought that I was rude and obnoxious to suggest that I
Of course.
didn't want to do it, but they could if they wanted to.
Of course, this would, I think, be the main criticism people might have had of you over the years.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah, I think so. He didn't want to be my bitch for me so I could have a holiday.
Right.
And I guess when you're talking about it as well, like this whole metaphor of this experience, the engagement of this, if you were to talk to a business executive who was running or was the leader of a business, or you're talking to government, heads of government or politicians, this very same thing would be, they would say to everybody else who had some complaint was, please get engaged and involved.
Yeah.
And so this is on a micro level or on a personal social level, a way to practice that, to get engaged, because I think we've been switched off since the 70s
Yeah.
of, big government telling us what to do and how to do it. So to learn to flex that muscle again is a bit risky for a lot of people to try.
Oh
Who
yeah.
are you to speak up and say what's what?
Yeah. it's yes, it's definitely risky. It's definitely something that makes some folk feel rather uneasy.
Mm.
And I'm going to persist with it for several reasons. One, because the development of people with the capacity to do that, to actually take action on those things that they care about, is necessary. And beyond that, I don't want to do all the things that they're asking me to do anyway. I'm just not
Exactly.
interested. So, like if you've got something that you want to bring to the village, bring it. I won't stand in your way. The whole group might, but it's not going to be me saying, no, you can't do that. It'll be me saying, if you have the energy for it, launch on in. If I agree with it, I'll actually launch in there with you. If I don't agree with it, I won't. But that doesn't need to stop you. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Peter. I think we've probably done our time for today.
I think we've done slightly more than 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you, to speak. And
Likewise.
really lovely, though, for a chance to give a shout out to the work that you do, who you are. I mean, didn't even get a chance to really explore your motivations in your personal life for this, but your life is your work is your life.
Oh, by the way, I can recommend that for anyone.
What's that? Your life being
Make
your work.
it, yes,
Yeah, right.
yes.
Exactly. Which is why, these living legends is there. There's no restriction on what you can do. Your life is up to you to live and
Right.
how you want it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just be willing to face the consequence, no matter what direction that might go, of taking firm decisions. There will be consequences, but consequence is not necessarily dark. Consequence can be that you find yourself with more joy, more bliss, more happiness, more beauty in your world than you could possibly have imagined, trudging off to work in the exhaust pipe of another person in one of our dark and deep and dangerous cities. Yeah,
Love you,
so
brother.
enough said.
Yeah, love you. And look forward to catching up with you again.